Hey everybody, how you doing? Hope you're having a nice week so far. It's really good to see you here again. So, for this week, we're going to take a look at something we have not talked about at all before. We'll work our way back to band lab, but today we're going to step back a little bit from band lab a little more. Today we're going to talk about how pitches in music all have names. And those names are what we call the musical alphabet. All right. So, for any of you who have ever played a musical instrument before or ever been through a music class, this is something you might be familiar with, but stick around because we're going to use it for something fun later on. So, please don't give up on it. Okay, before we get too far ahead of ourselves here, let's just make sure we all understand what pitch is. In music, when we say the word pitch, we're talking about how high or low a sound is. Sort of like how maybe some men, older men, may have a lower voice. We say they have a low pitched voice, or maybe a young child usually has a higher voice. We say that's a higher pitch. Some instruments may have a higher pitch, some instruments may be a lower pitch, but that is what we're talking about when we use that word in music. In music, we use 7 letters to name each pitch in music. And then there's also another 5 versions that we can adjust of those to add up with 12 different notes, as we would call them in music. They're 12 different unique pitches. And we named these using letters from the alphabet. Now, what we usually will use here is the first 7 letters of the alphabet, which of course are A, B, C, D, E, F, and G. 7 letters. Okay? And what we'll use here is, as you've heard music, I'm sure you've heard there's a lot more low pitches and high pitches, everything in between. There's a lot more than 7. So what we'll use is when we get to G, we'll recycle that same alphabet and go right back to A. So A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. And the further, if you want a higher pitch, there's multiple different A's. A very high A, a little bit of a lower A, maybe a middle A lower A, an even lower A, and so on for every single letter in the musical alphabet. The best way we can look at this is to take a look at a piano keyboard and see how this is organized. Okay, so let's take a look at this piano keyboard here. What we want to focus on right now are the white keys, and especially this one that's highlighted in blue. If we look right next to those, you'll notice that there are black keys that go in a pattern all the way across the keyboard. They're going a group of 2, then a group of 3, group of 2, group of 3, and so on. And this repeats, as you can see here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times. Now, if this right here, when you see this group of 2 black keys, right to the left of that is what we're going to call C. Now, this is called middle C because it's pretty close to the middle of the piano. There's another good reason why it's called middle C, which we'll get to when we learn how to read music later on. But if that's C, the letter before is B, and the one right after it is going to be D. So if we take a look here, you can now see, no pun intended, that it goes C, D, E, F, G. And like I mentioned before, it repeats right back to A. And this pattern on the white keys just follows the alphabet from A to G and then back to A. The easiest way to find this is find a group of 2 black keys. The one right in between is D. And if you go before it, it goes C, B, and A. And of course, after E, F, G. So right there, it's kind of right in the middle of our little musical alphabet. Now in there, you may have realized that we only focused on the white colored keys. Yes, there are also black keys, but let's take a look back. You tell me, how many black keys are there for every 7 white keys? Let's take a look. If you said that there were 5 black keys mixed in amongst the letters A through G on the white keys, you'd be correct. So those black keys are those 5 extra ones I mentioned earlier. Remember, we said that there's 12 different pitches in music, not just 7. Because we add those 5 black keys to our 7 now, we've got our 12-tone pitch system, which is what Western music is all based on. These black keys are given names that we call flat and sharp. Now, the symbol for flats looks kind of like a little bit of a lowercase b, but don't confuse that with the pitch B. Okay, we don't want to confuse that. So the little lowercase b, that's the symbol for flat. It has nothing to do with the note pitch name B, except for the fact that sometimes B can be B flat, and it looks like uppercase B, lowercase b. The other one is what we call sharps, and the symbol for sharps looks like, yeah, it looks kind of like a number sign. Now, there are 5 black keys, and they can be named either a sharp or a flat. Now, this is kind of confusing, so stay with me here. Let's pick a spot on our piano. Let's say we're here. That puts us right in between C and D. Now, you've got a black key between C and D. It really depends on the direction we're going in. If we go up from C up to D, this is usually what we'll call making a note sharp. If we want a sound that's slightly higher than C but a little bit lower than D, we'll call that, if we're going up from C, C sharp, because we're coming up from the C going towards the D. Now, if we're going the other direction, if we're going down from D down to C, but we want a note that's not as low as C but still lower than D, that black key is in between the two, so it will work. But because we're coming down from D, we're making D lower. When we make a note lower, we call that a flat. So the black key between C and D, we would call that D flat because it's coming down from D. But we could also call it C sharp because it's coming up from C. So now that you see what I'm saying here, all of the black keys have 2 names, a sharp name and a flat name. You take the key before it and you make them that, if you go up from there, it would be the sharp. And if you look at the key that's after it, it's that letter, flat. Now let's play a little game here. Let's see if you guys can figure out what some of these keys are by just a quick glance. Maybe take about 10 seconds to take a look at each one, and let's see if you got the right answer. Let's see. So let's make this question 1. What pitch is this? If you said A, you're correct. Now let's see what number 2 is here. What is this? If you said D as in dog, you're correct. Let's see, number 3. If you said F, you're spot on the money. All right, let's get tricky here. Question 4. I'm looking for a flat. If you said B flat, you're correct, which is really the most common note that we'll see flat, which we'll get into why way later on in the year, but there's a very good theoretical reason for that. Last one here, the one we're going to use the absolute most. What key is this? If you said C, you're spot on the money. Now, we're going to wrap this up. When we come back next block, we're actually going to begin to learn a song that I'm pretty sure most of you are familiar with, especially at this time of the year. If you have a piano in your house, whether it be an electric keyboard, a little toy one, plastic, whatever, or a full-on piano, go check it out. See if you can figure out how to just take your hand and set your thumb on C and roll your pinky finger right up to G. So from C to G, use your right hand. It's a good place to start. Your thumb on C, C, D, E, F, G, or I should say C, D, E, F, G. Try it out. And when we get back together for our next block, I think you're going to like what we have. We're going to start making some noise. Have fun. I'll see you guys in a little bit. Thank you, everybody.